Well, it seems like a lot of you tech people really like your white motherboards. So I have another one for you, which is this MSI X870E Edge Wi-Fi. Oh wait, it is not white actually. It is a more diverse mix of grayscale tones as well as silver. The majority of the board is grey, complemented with a black CPU area, black RAM slots, as well as most connectors and headers which are also black. That said, there has to be some white element on this board. Well, kinda, because I'm not very sure if you can see it. The base plate has more of a faded white/yellow tint, and there are some specks and dots on them. The true white parts are the back I/O and the 3 ARGB headers on the top as well as on the bottom. I guess that because they are used often, the white helps them to stand out amongst the other headers on the board. But I like that this MSI HDI is not just any other plain board. There are polished or more like shiny surfaces on the VRM heatsinks, the top M.2 heatsink, as well as on the PCH area. MSI further drops its branding with the text H and MPG, as well as MSI Performance Gaming on the plastic piece on the knob bridge, and on the bottom M.2 heatsink. And of course, the very essential MSI Dragon emblem on the knob bridge, which lights up and changes colors. This is possibly the only thing which lights up on this board. This X870E is almost as densely packed as the X870E Carbon, which gives it some mass, but I feel that it is not as heavy as the Carbon. This Edge doesn't feature the same one-piece middle M.2 heatsink as the Carbon, but has individual heatsinks for the middle M.2 slots. One thing to note is the center screw hole is hidden beneath the top M.2 heatsink. So you will need to remove this heatsink first before you can access the mounting hole. On further inspection, I like that each connector and header are well labelled, especially for both the fans and pump headers on the top, which you use for your CPU coolers. The pump header in this case also stands out because it is white. Okay, and before I get on too far ahead, I'm going to do my usual motherboard run, which begins at the back I/O. From left to right, we have 2 mini button bros packed together, which are the flash BIOS and the clear CMOS. We also have one HDMI 2.1. There is no display port on this board. One USB Type-C 40 GB/s port, followed by one USB Type-A 10 GB/s, which is used to flash your BIOS. The second USB Type-C 40 GB/s, followed by another 3 Type-A 10 GB/s ports. There are also 4 USB 2.0 ports, which is kind of interesting because I guess there is not enough bandwidth left for 5 GB ports, but it doesn't matter because you have 4 Type-A 10 GB/s ports on this board. We also have another Type-C, but this is 10 GB/s, followed by another Type-A 10 GB/s in red. That's already 5 Type-A ports, and a 5G LAN or Ethernet port, following which we have the pair of Wi-Fi 7 connectors, which gives you Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4 when you insert the Wi-Fi antenna. And we finish it with the line out plus my in ports and the optical SPDIF out connector. And since we have mentioned the USB ports at the back, like the X870E Carbon, there's more USB ports at the front. So for the front I/O, we have one Type-C 20 GB/s port, which is right angled, 2 more 5 GB/s ports, which are also right angled, as well as 2 USB 2.0 ports at the bottom. Both the USB 5 GB and the USB 2.0 gives you up to 4 ports when you use the 2 headers on the board. It is nice to see that all of these ports, plus the 4 SATA ports, which I will talk about later, are in a nice row, hidden beneath the PCH. It's a very nice clean look, which makes it stand out on this motherboard. So let's turn our attention back to the main area. The CPU area, which is black surprisingly, accepts your Ryzen 7000, 8000 as well as 9000 CPUs. For this video, I'm just going to focus on Ryzen 7000 as well as Ryzen 9000. So the board also comes with 2 standard 8-pin EPS connectors for your CPU and a very shiny top VRM heatsink, which you can also see a heat pipe running through it. This VRM heatsink is quite a good height actually, so that it can dissipate the heat around the CPU much better. On the left, there is a fully covered knob bridge, which extends all the way to the back I/O, which also does a good job to remove the heat that may be created around the CPU area. The next main area are the 4 RAM slots. You can put up to 4 sticks of 64 gigs each, which gives you up to 256 gigs of RAM. You will be able to get very high RAM speeds if you use the CU DIMMs, but you are not able to use ECC RAM on this motherboard. I'm not going to mention which brand or what RAM speeds you can use or achieve on this board, so do check out the QVL or the qualified vendor list on the motherboard's website. And going upwards, I have already mentioned about these three main headers, but how about the ones next to the RAM slots? I don't know what is this J2, so I'm just going to skip it. Next to it, we have the first system fan header, followed by the first 3-pin ARGB header in white, and the vertical row of Easy Debug LED, as well as Easy DG Debug LED. So hard to pronounce, but basically they are like Q diagnostic LEDs and a Q code diagnostic LEDs in the other brand. This too helps you to diagnose your board when you have trouble, for example, booting up the board, or when you have things like the CPU or RAM or whatever issues that you may face while using this motherboard. Going on to the right center, we have the 24-pin ATX power connector in black, followed by this JAF-2, or what MSI actually calls the Easy Con Header V2. So in the box, you can find this cable called the Easy Con Header cable, which when plugged to this Easy Con Header, allows you to connect the ARGB Gen 1 as well as Gen 2 LED strips, fans, and USB. It also can be used to connect MSI's MPG EZ120 ARGB fans. They are MSI's own version, own take on the daisy chain as well as the single connector fans. So essentially what I think is this one cable which allows you to connect one fan, I think saves up one fan header and one ARGB as well as one USB 2.0 on this motherboard, because it is a one-size-fits-all cable. I believe other fan brands should also work with this cable, which I have to test, I'm not very sure. And I also think that it will work with AIOs that require ARGB, a fan connector, as well as a USB 2.0 to interface with the motherboard. So all of these things require some testing, and I'll get back to you when I have run it on this motherboard. Going downwards, I have already mentioned about the front I/O as well as the SATA ports. And going on to the bottom right, we have the front I/O panel. What is interesting is that there is no diagram to teach you how to install the front I/O wire leads on this motherboard. So you have to refer to the manual if you are not sure or you forgot how to install the front I/O. But no matter, because MSI has given you this easy front panel cable which you can use to connect the front I/O to front I/O wires to before you insert this cable to the motherboard. This essentially saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of effort to remember how to actually install the front I/O leads to the motherboard. Going on to the bottom right, we have the second 3-pin ARGB header with the JBET jumper, which is used to clear your CMOS. There are also two system fan headers, 4 and 5, the LED switch 1 and the JFP2 on top of the LED switch 1. The LED switch 1 allows you to turn off and on all of the LEDs on the board, and this JFP2 is the other half of the front panel options that you can find on this motherboard. Going to the bottom center, I have already mentioned about the two USB 2.0, and there is one more system fan header here. The additional 8-pin PCIe power to give more juice for the crazy PCIe 5.0 GPUs. Another system fan header, chassis intrusion header on top, as well as the J-Power LED one for retailers to showcase all of the LED on the board without having the need to power on the board. And rounding it up at the bottom left, we have the front audio connector, as well as a 4-pin RGB header and the first 3-pin ARGB header. I am done with headers on this board. This was a pretty long one. Okay, so now let's go on to the second main area of the board, which consists of the PCIe as well as the M.2 sockets on the board. I am going to start off with storage. I have already mentioned about 4 SATA ports. The second main part of storage are the M.2 slots. So like the CPU, I'm just going to focus on Ryzen 7000 and 9000. There are 4 M.2 slots on this board. The first and fourth M.2 slots have their own heatsinks, while the second and third slots share one heatsink. All M.2 heatsinks use the push and lift method. I first showed this on the Z90 Carbon. You see the same kind of mechanism on this motherboard. The heatsinks are very well designed. They are very solid. They are silver in color, and the top one has grooves on it, and it is very shiny. Alright, so let's remove all 3 M.2 heatsinks and let's go through it one by one. The first M.2 slot is a PCIe 5.0 X4. This slot allows you to put the regular 2280 as well as the longer 2210 SSDs. This slot comes with top and bottom thermal pads, which definitely is useful for a Gen 5 SSD. If you want to use the longer 2210, you'll need to use the included Easy M.2 clip remover to remove the Easy M.2 clip 2 in this 2280 hole, followed by securing the included M.2 plate screw in the 2280 hole. So hard to pronounce all of these easy things from MSI. Going up next, we have the second M.2 and the third M.2. The second M.2 slot is also a PCIe 5.0 X4, but it does not have a double thermal pad backing as the first slot, and the heatsink is actually thinner than the first. So I'm actually not very sure if you want to use a Gen 5 SSD on this slot, but you still can because it runs at the full Gen 5 speed. So just make sure that the temperatures of your SSD does not exceed a certain amount when you use this second slot. If it runs too hot, just keep the SSD on the first slot. So we see the same SSD configuration on the third as well as the fourth M.2 slots, 2280 and 2260. Both of these slots are PCIe 4.0 X4. To install your SSDs, slide the gold parts into the connector in the M.2 slot and click the other end into this ball thing called the Easy Clip 2. Make sure that the ball is flushed with your SSD. The ball part can lean out if it's not installed properly. To remove the SSD, use your fingernail or something to pull the ball away, and your SSD will either spring out or you have to lift off the SSD off the board. And when you're done installing your SSDs, do remember to remove all of the thermal pad films from the bottom backing if you use the first slot, as well as all of the films on the M.2 heatsinks before reinstalling the heatsink onto the respective M.2 slots. To install the heatsink, just slide the heatsink grooves into the prongs and press down on the left balls. In my opinion, I feel that it is a hit and sometimes a miss for these ball clips. I mean, they are definitely less flimsy than the plastic turning lockers, and most of the time it is easy to install and remove your SSDs. But there are times when it can be more difficult to remove the SSD because you have to use some effort to pull the ball clip away to disengage the SSD. The SSD sometimes doesn't disengage as well as you want it to be. At least the thermal pads on the heatsinks do not make the SSD sticky, which in turn makes it a lot harder to remove the heatsinks. And I do like MSI's way of removing heatsinks. Just press and remove. And there's also enough surface area to press down on the lever to remove the heatsinks. And going on to our final area, which are the PCI slots, MSI gives you 3 PCI slots for this motherboard. The first one, of course, we all know is a PCIe 5.0 X16. The second one is a PCIe 3.0 X1, and rounding up, we have a PCIe 4.0 X4 at the bottom. The top PCI slot comes with its own Easy PCI release button, which is white, which is nice because it makes it stand out among the rest of the black connectors around it. And before I go on to the white button, I would like to mention that the second PCI slot does not have any catch or lock inside the PCI slot. The only thing that's going to hold whatever you plan to install in that slot is the slot itself, as well as the PCI screws that you use to secure whatever PCI equipment that you have installed to the case. Anyway, I've just tested using the 5070 Ti Vanguard. Because of the size of the card as well as the protrusions on the card's housing, this 3.0 X1 slot is not exactly usable when you have a big card on the first PCI slot. As for the bottom 4.0 X4 slot, I guess you can use a capture card or a sound card to give you more superior sound for your PC build. Or perhaps you can use MSI's M.2 expansion card. But that's an issue because that card is Gen 5. You will be stifling the performance of the card if you use that on the last PCI slot. And you definitely will not use it on the top PCI slot because that's where your main GPU will go in, especially if you have a RTX 50 series, which are Gen 5 graphics cards. Not an option unless you don't mind running Gen 4 speeds on your Gen 5 expansion card. Okay, I still have to talk about the white Easy PCI release button. I'm still not really a fan of the convention, but I guess using it more often, I can get used to it. I have mentioned in the Z90 Carbon video, it uses the same config here. When the button is depressed, it means that it is unlocked. When it's unpressed, it means it's locked. To me, it feels a bit counterintuitive because it's like a door. When you press it, it means you lock it. And when you unpress it, it means you are unlocking it. So I don't understand, but maybe it's to tell users that you need to press it down to make sure that it's locked because it's looking upwards. and not downwards. So yeah, this is just my problem. If it doesn't affect you, don't worry about it. Anyway, MSI tells you to unpress it first to unlock it before installing the GPU. And when you want to release your graphics card, just press the button to unlock it and pull the GPU away. Or the other way is you can install the GPU first, unpress the button to lock it, then press the button again when you want to remove your graphics card. Okay, well, this is not exactly a full review, more like a walkthrough or mini review. I hope that this video gives you a good insights if you want to buy this motherboard. So I just have to mention about some things. This HTI, well, at least in my opinion, is a unique standout board from the other boards that MSI has in their lineup. First, as I've mentioned, it looks white from afar, but it actually isn't quite white when you see it up close. It is more of a tinted white with a grayscale and a black design. But the shiny parts on the board really accentuates the unique design of this motherboard. I like that MSI, while trying to pack as many features as they can, doesn't make it as dense compared to the Z890 Carbon or the X870E Carbon. And 2, the connectors and headers are nicely labeled with big text, making it very easy for the first-time user or first-time builder who uses this board for their PC build. And also, as mentioned earlier, MSI provides you with this easy front panel cable in lieu of the wiring diagram, which overall actually makes it a much better experience when you have to install the front panel wires onto the front panel connector. I hope that this information is good enough if you want to buy this board. If you feel so, do like the video. Comment down below if you prefer the Carbon over this board or you like this board over the Carbon. And you can watch my review of Z890 Carbon and also catch you in the next video.